Hello, we've got an interesting case today. We're going to talk in multiple episodes about restoring this edentulous area as well as the teeth on either side of it. You can see a large composite filling on the second bite, large filling here on the second molar. This video is demonstrating endodontics on a 3-rooted second molar, mandibular second molar tooth and a 1-rooted second bicuspid tooth. I'm using the real world endo through Brasileir endodontic method. If you want the very best videos, subscribe to dentistrymasterclasses.com. Click on the blue link in the description below. That has a library of all the Dental Minute videos plus many complete comprehensive cases, as well as a library of pertinent articles that you will want to read. So subscribe to dentistrymasterclasses.com if you want the very best material. So this is actually the final result with an implant abutment and crown, and then 2 crowns on the second bicuspid and the second molar. So we're only talking about endodontics in this episode. Here's the before and after endodontics and crown on the second molar, and here's the before and after endodontics on the second bicuspid. You can see here's the apex of the root right here, and we'll be showing the real world endodontic technique by Brasileir. I really like that method. It's a rotary system, a single gutta-percha-cone fill, and it's very easy and very straightforward. Now, the first thing is to give a mandibular block, and then anytime you're doing endodontics or anything significant to a tooth, don't forget, give an intraligamental injection. Place the bevel of the needle into the sulcus. Now this is after you've given the block or the infiltration, and you're going to use Sit-Nest 4% plain because it's pH neutral, and you're just going to apply steady pressure for about 20 seconds in the sulcus. And if it's a molar tooth, I'll often do it on the facial and the lingual, and that tooth will be dead numb. If you only give a block or only give infiltration, many teeth are not going to be completely numb. So if you want to gain the confidence of your patient, don't let them have any discomfort. And this is a painless injection procedure, and the tooth is dead numb, so they don't feel anything when you're doing the procedure. Doing the same thing on the bicuspid. You can see the large composite filling here, placing the rubber dam clamp. If you're not using this rubber dam method, watch the video and start using it. It will save you so much stress. It makes dentistry so relaxing because the patient's tongue's out of the way, 99% of the saliva's out of the way, the cheek's out of the way. The patient doesn't have to worry about water in their mouth. You still have an assistant aspirating, but it just takes a lot of the stress out of the way. Use what we call a tooth rest, a bite block, and this rubber dam procedure is very easy. It's a little different than the one you learned in dental school because you're not placing it between every tooth. It's just a long stretch, but watch the video. The dental school technique is fine, but it just takes longer, and you're having to deal with those little rubber attachments between every tooth. This one, you just got one at the front and the back. But it takes me literally 15 seconds to place a rubber dam, and oh my gosh, the patient likes it, and it's wonderful for you. So this is a 330 carbide burr, and just my access opening, relight pressure. Now, once I've made my initial cut into the roof of the pulp chamber, I'm coming back with a coarse football diamond. Because as Alex Flory, the endodontist that taught most of our endo courses at my teaching center in Dallas, the Center for Aesthetic Restorative Dentistry, said, you want straight line access to the canals. Now what that means is, when you're using your files or your drills, you want to go straight into the canal. You don't want to have to curve it into the canals. So that's what I'm using this coarse football diamond for. I'm opening this up, so when I go into the canals, I'm going straight in. It's called straight line access. See a little bit of bleeding? Here we go. So see, I've opened this up, so I'm going to be able to go straight into the canals. We've got 1 or 2 distal canals and then 2 mesial canals. Now this is local anesthesia, and I use Sit-Nest plain for the intraligamental injection and my first injection when I'm giving a mandibular block or infiltration because they're pH neutral and you don't feel it. Watch that video on how to give painless and profound local anesthesia. It's fabulous, and it will win the patient over because they don't feel anything. Now when I'm numbing into the already anesthetized tooth, I'm using lidocaine, 2%, 1 to 100,000 epinephrine. Now why am I doing this? Just to make absolutely positively sure everything is dead numb. It doesn't take 2 seconds, and just anesthetize straight into the canals. If you're not using this real world endo system, I think you're going to really like it. Now this is number 6, slow speed round burr, and I'm just cleaning out the canals, cleaning out the roof of the chamber. And you place it, the burr into the chamber with no motion, and then move it up the walls. So you open everything up, again, creating that straight line access and getting rid of the roof of the pulp chamber. Now back to my coarse football diamond and just opening everything up so you've got a little cup or a little foxhole that you can work in. Set yourself up so that it's easy once you actually start cleaning out the canals. So I've got straight access into the canals. You can see the nerve. Now this is a fine chamfer diamond, and I'm just lightly placing that into the orifice of the canals and just cleaning out. So I'm opening them just a little bit. I'm not putting any apical pressure, just opening it up so I've got good access to the canals. I'm checking this with a straight Endo Explorer, just a little more fine tuning, occlusal reduction, opening it up. And it's worth taking 5 minutes and get real good access before you start cleaning the canals. Now this is the armamentarium for opening the canals. I've got number 10 Hedstrom and K-type files. I use Hedstrom files more than K-type because they cut more efficiently. Then you've got the real world endo drill sequence from a 25, 30, 35, 40, all the way up to larger file sizes. This drill right here is invaluable. It's a scalp file. What you use this for is finding those little tiny sclerotic canals. I don't know that you can separate a scalp file. I never have. And you can, once you've opened the tooth, you can take this scalp file, squirt some water or sodium hypochlorite in that area, and just start kind of poking on that area, and you'll fall into those canals, and it'll go all the way to the bottom very easily, so you gain access. Then, this is a new development. I don't know when the Real World Endo came out with this. It's a one file filing system, the EJ02, and it files so that the gutta percha point you use to fill the canal is at 30 with a 0.04 taper, and you just place that in the canal, and because it's squiggly like that, it really cleans it out well. So this is what I use for endodontics. I'll use this most of the time. Sometimes I'll use this, and most of the time before I use this EJ02, I'll take a 35 or a 40 drill and open the coronal part of the canal to that 35 or 40, just so I've got more opening, and that's to hold the water sodium hypochlorite mixture. If you've got just a little tiny opening right there, you don't pool as much sodium hypochlorite. So I'll use a 30, as soon as I get access opening, I'll use normally a 35 file or drill and just open the coronal part of the canal so that it creates a little pool that you can squirt the sodium hypochlorite into, and it holds it so you have excellent lubrication when you're filing the canal. Don't ever file a dry canal. Don't ever file a dry canal. Be sure it's lubricated, or you're more prone to separating a file. Okay, so we're first going to measure the length of the canal. And remember, I've reduced the occlusion about 1.5 millimeters or 2, so we're going to measure from the approximate occlusion reduction spot down to the apex of the root, and that's about 17 millimeters. We're going to do that before we do any filing. So I'm measuring the scalp file, so that's about 17 millimeters. And I'm filling this up with 3 parts water, 1 part sodium hypochlorite. Now, many endodontists and other people use straight sodium hypochlorite. No problem if you do that. I was taught this originally when I started doing endo 40 years ago, because this particular endodontist had a sodium hypochlorite accident where it had gone through the apex of the teeth into the mandibular nerve, and it was a problem. So he said, this guy used 5 to 1, 5 parts water to 1 part sodium hypochlorite. So I've used 3 parts water and 1 part sodium hypochlorite all these years, and it's been highly successful. I think in 40 years I've lost 1 tooth on which I've performed endodontics, and that tooth was split all the way through, and we were just doing a heroic save. So this is a very predictable endodontic technique. I haven't used the Real World Endo technique all that time, but I have used the 3 parts water, 1 part sodium hypochlorite. So this is the scalp file. All this file is doing is accessing the canal and going to the apical part of the canal. Now, this is a hand file. This is the Hedstrom hand file. I always start with Hedstrom hand files. Why? You want to clean the canal before you start using drills, just in case you separated a file. Now, I've never separated an EJ02. I have separated some of the other Real World Endo files, the 25 through 40. And the larger they get, the more likely they are to separate if you go around the curve. So hand file first, because if you've hand filed well first down to the apex with this Hedstrom file, cleaned it out and irrigated it well, if you happen to separate a file, it's probably going to be just fine. You don't have to necessarily try to retrieve the file, because retrieving a file can be detrimental to the tooth. You want to be sure you tell the patient if you do separate a file. But in all these years, if I hand file and irrigate first, you've cleaned out 99.9% of the nerve with the Hedstrom file. And if you do that first and irrigate it out, if you should separate a drill, it's never been an issue with me. I would just leave the file unless it was a big infection or something like that, because you don't want to damage the root. You don't want to perforate the root going after that separated file. So I'm sure there are differences of opinion on that. I'm just saying I've never had a problem with a separated file, because I always file it real well with a Hedstrom number 10 hand file with sodium hypochlorite before I start using my drills. Just filing the depth. Now I'm going to measure. See, that's 0.05. That's perfect. And here I'm doing the second canal with the hand file. These are the Hedstrom I'm using. Measuring that, 0.05 again. And then doing the third one. Now, what if you don't get a good read on your measuring device? There's probably too much liquid in the canal. And so just take your air syringe and just blow it out a little bit. Just clean some of that liquid out, and you should get a good read. Now I'm going with my EJ02. And remember, when this is finished, a 30 gutta percha cone should fit that canal perfect. So I've opened the apical part of the canal, probably the apical 2 to 5 millimeters, with that 35 drill, size 35. Then I first used my scalp file, then my hand files, then my 35 drill, irrigating with my 3 parts water, 1 part sodium hypochlorite all the way. Now I'm using my EJ02 file. I've never separated an EJ02 file. I suppose you could if there was too much pressure, but what you do when you're using this file, you place it until it grabs a little bit, then pull it up, then place it again until it grabs, and then you eventually get to depth. You can see I put it until it just barely grabs and come up, and it goes real quickly. Now I'm going into the other canals. Now what if you go into a canal and it won't go? There's probably a curve in the canal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back with my scout file, the scout drill, and be sure I can go to depth. Then I'm going to go use my Hedstrom hand file again and clean out that area and try to remove some of that curve so that this will go to depth. I've not ever had a case that I couldn't go to depth using that technique. Scout file, then Hedstrom hand file, then back with the EJ02. Now I'm irrigating. I've cleaned all the canals out. Now I'm irrigating with